I had the most absurd nightmare. I was poor and no one liked me. I lost my job, I'd lost my house, Penelope hated me, and it was all because of this terrible man, Lou Diamond.
Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Hey, Thrive Loud fans, Lou Diamond here. Hope you're doing well. It's the middle of April here, April 15th, that this episode drops. And still dealing with COVID-19 here in the Northeast, across the globe, around the country, whether you're social distancing, quarantining, doing whatever it is that you need to do to stay safe. Hope you're doing that. And hopefully you're getting a chance to catch up on some great podcast episodes. With that, let me catch you up on some of the great things that we've had the last few if you haven't had a chance to hear some of those. You can go back to Simon T. Bailey, Be the Spark. That was pulled from the Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive podcast. We had that episode 439 launched last week. He's so inspiring. He's awesome and really great positive messages, stuff we could all benefit from right now. Had a great interview with Alan Kay, Lane Frank, and Mindy Barnett, the founders of Virtual 5 O'Clock. Great group. It's a networking idea and group and concept that is really gaining traction and is a phenomenal way to bring people together in this time when we can't be connected. So 3 connectors using their superpowers. It was a fun episode to hear the story and how it all came out. Had Robbie Samuels, Croissants vs. Bagels. Robbie's got his own podcast. You know, he is the schmooze man, so I think you'll enjoy listening to that. I think it was pretty funny. Croissants vs. Bagels actually dropped on Passover, so we should have named it Croissants, Bagels, and Matzah. Oh well, what are we going to do? Moving on, we had Angela Myers give a great, inspiring message in a Thrive Loud catch-up episode 442, We All Matter. Really fun to listen to. Angela is so inspiring. I swear she had like 4 or 5 quotes in there that we could have just framed and you could put on your wall. They were so great. Thank you, Angela, for catching up with me. It was great to catch up with you. Then we had the Thrive Loud quarantine episode recorded from beyond 6 feet in my driveway. Thank you, Jeff Dorst, for coming on the program. Jeff, you were great. We kept our social distance. We had a very long table, tissues, and a very long cord just in case of emergencies. But it was really educational to talk about living in quarantine right now. And finally, Dirk Izzo, Keep Commerce Running, the VP of NCR Hospitality. Obviously, when you go to a restaurant and you see all those systems, whether it's the reservation system, the checkout, every aspect you can imagine, NCR has been instrumental with that. And the restaurant industry has gotten really hit hard and had to really think about how they can change, go virtual, use the internet more often, do more delivery and pickup services. And Dirk Izzo and his team over at NCR offering tremendous services for those that own restaurants, a key aspect of our economy and our business, and really reaching out and doing some great stuff. So there's some great information about the programs that they're offering there as well. Thank you, Dirk, for coming on the program. With that, and thank you for that long intro here. A little too long for you, I know. Usually we're brief, we're bright, we're gone. This is pulled from Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive, one of the original founders of the New York Roadrunners Club, Vincent Chiappetta. Basically the man behind putting the New York City Marathon together. Now in his late 80s, wrote a book called New York as We Know It. You'll love this episode I had with him. Great conversation, really interesting man with a great story of how the New York Marathon got started. Good distraction for you. Everyone be safe. And here you go from Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive, Vincent Chiappetta, here on Thrive Loud.
Welcome to Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive, a podcast show that provides you exclusive access to top writers around the globe and how they are thriving through their writing, their passions, and their lives. Here's your host, Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive, connecting you to amazing authors that are thriving through their work and in their lives each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today, we have the co-founder and 4th president of the New York Roadrunners Club. He's been running for over 70 years, He was the yin to Fred Lebow's yang when they co-founded New York Roadrunners and the New York City Marathon. During his heyday, he ran a total of 114 marathons. Oh, my goodness. 50 of them under 240. Flirting with his 90s, he still teaches at Yeshiva University. He is the author of New York as We Know It. Very few people have been around the New York City running scene as long as this man. Thrive Loud listeners, Vincent Chiappetta. Vincent, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for calling.
An impressive career. I know that we actually tried to schedule our first call and you were in the middle of running. So you're still running to this day. Is it still not your favorite thing in the entire world?
Yeah, well, it's important. I still crawl anyway. Now I just call crawling. I used to run. Now I crawl.
Share with the listeners, if you will. How old are you today as we record this?
86.
86 years old. Are you still running marathons? Let's start off with that.
Oh, no, I'm not competing anymore.
Okay.
If you can't train right, you don't do it. So I'm just a jogger now.
So the history of the New York City Marathon is unbelievable. To help the listeners who aren't as familiar, when the marathon was first run way back in its inception when you were there, how many people actually ran in the marathon?
Oh, 126 was the first group of people.
126 people. I would say that number today is what, over 50,000 people run every year?
2,000, I think. Yeah, over 50, yes, definitely.
Unbelievable. I guess maybe share with the listeners a little bit before we talk about this book that you wrote. The idea of running the marathon, obviously there were a lot of runners around. Was there any light bulb that went off as you guys co-founded this thing way back when and said, hey, this is something we want to do?
Well, no, the guys who ran wanted to do it. Our major goal, we formed the Roadrunners Club of America in 1958, was to promote long-distance running. And there were just a few of us involved with all of this. And New York was really, and Philadelphia and Washington were the areas where people promoted it mostly, then to Boston later on, because Boston was its own marathon. What had happened was we were running in Van Cortlandt Park, and also we ran from Yankee Stadium up Sedgwick Avenue. That's where most of our racing was. But unfortunately, they were building housing, and bus routes started building up on our route, so it wasn't safe anymore, and we had to try to find a way of doing something different. And unfortunately, I was the president of the local organization at that time. I was trying to get the Parks Department to agree to let me run in Central Park, but they didn't agree. There was a lot of negativity about it, and they were really promoting walking and biking in those days, and running who ran,
Right.
And then Fred got involved running, and he ran what do we call our Cherry Tree Marathon, and so I had met him. I had met him at that point. I was busy. I ran the race, scored the race. I had to go to a lecture later on that I had to give, and so he finally, a couple of months later, he finally found out who I was, and he was told to call me if we're not doing anything and running without me. So he gets a hold of me on the phone, and he started telling me a story about he was a part of a group of millionaire marathoners and so forth. And I said, look, I'm used to guys like you always call and do this and do that. I know all the millionaires that run, and you don't know any of them. So what's the story? So we didn't laugh in those days, but it was very funny. So I said, look, I like the idea of a military marathon. If these guys, you can fake that around, I can use you to help us out. And so we got together and met, and I said, okay, nobody knows you, so do me a favor. Get the Parks Commissioner's Recreation Commissioner, Hayes Jones, to get a meeting with him and say we represent millionaire marathoners to want to put a race in Central Park, because the Park Department likes millionaires. So he gets the appointment, and I told him, tell him that you're going to bring a known international marathon promoter, which is me. But I said, don't tell him it's me. And so he gets the appointment with Hayes, who was an Olympic sprinter at that time, but he was being blocked by everybody in the park department to do any work. So he gets there to the park with an appointment for him, and when we leave the arsenal, and out comes Hayes, and I said, Hayes, we have a meeting with you. He says, oh, I figured it was you. I said, well, I just quit. Go speak to my assistants. What do you mean you quit? He says, you were right. I couldn't handle anymore. These guys were blocking me all the time, and so he quit. So we were ushered into Herman Bedilio's K-Pen director, who that's how he made his money between campaigns. He was assistant park recreation commissioner, and he knew nothing about anything. So we walk in. I said, marathon, and so Fred gave me a spiel about, he represented these marathon runners and who I was. He didn't know who I was, And he says, gee, I don't know anything about this stuff. So he directed us to two park pros, Dave Lassane and Joe Retzberg, guys that really did the work. And so we went to him, and Fred started to spiel along there, and I told him who I was, and so forth. And he says, "What? That's great. It's a good idea." So they sat down, and Joe Redberg sat down and typed up a 10-page report on how to put a marathon, quoting me, into book. And he says, "Don't worry about it. We'll get it okay." And so we wrote this whole thing about putting a marathon in the park. He went to Central Park commissioner, who hated my guts, but I said, "Don't tell him it's me." He said, "Don't worry about what He got him to put down a number, which only was a number. He came back and said, "Here, you keep this copy, we keep this copy. Now what you ought to do is just call us up, use that number, and you get into the park." So, we broke the barrier, and Fred was trying to put a marathon. I said, "Look, Fred, we want to put a marathon there." Now the thing is, we got to play this right. So I sat down, typed up an entry blank, and I decided to put Fred's name on the entry blank because I didn't trust him, because he was going to provide the money.
Right.
And his roommate says, "Don't trust him. I'll probably put the money up." That was Brian Crawford. And so I bring this thing up. I bring it to the park department with my number on it. And they said, "When do you want to do this?" I said, September 13th. That was a place for a time. And so I said, "Okay." So he gave us a permit to do it. And we went ahead. And I said, "Okay, let's get started." And we sent an entry blank out, and people thought it was crazy. And they said they entered the marathon. And I said, just do one thing. Just play the marathon millionaire. I'll do all the rest. And then you can show off every time we need it. And so we got these entries coming in. The guy in the Parks Department guy, who was the Parks guy, did the work at Central Park. I knew him already. And he says, so I said, I got your thing. How'd you get past them? I says, well, Joe Retzberg and Dave Lassane, so they're great guys. And so he just, whatever I asked him to do, he did. The water, we got the water from Tavern on the Green. We Ted Corbett and I set up the course around on the park in the marathon in the park to do it.
And Vincent, Vincent, at this point, was the marathon only in Central Park and only in Manhattan, or did it extend out to any of them?
No. It was only in Central Park.
Okay.
We only had permission to work in Central Park. See?
Right. And what year was this? Just so we can.
This was 1970.
Okay.
September 13th, and so then the problem was we measured the park, but we were short, and so Ted and I worked out a situation. So we started at the entrance to the park by Tavern on the Green. We ran north towards 72nd Street. There was a parking lot in those days. So we ran around the parking lot and came back down to the finish line thing, and then we were able to do one lap around the lower level of the park and then 4 around the 6 mile area and got a marathon out of it. That's how
Amazing.
we began. So we did it for three years, but it started getting big, and finally we were able to get this to finish at Central Park South West entrance, and that gave us that piece we needed. We didn't have to do a little loop, extra loop of 72nd.
Vincent, when did the marathon extend to the rest of New York? When did it start leaving?
Well, I was 76.
Okay, so it took about 6 years until you went to.
Well, this was the 7th one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, we had 6. Yeah, and this 7, and then what ended up happening? Fred was president at this point, and we couldn't run a marathon anymore there because we had almost 2,000 people.
Wow.
And it was too much lapping and everything else, and guys were cheating and so forth. Yeah, the good thing I knew everybody, so anybody that got in ahead of me, I could not tell right away they were lying, And
so Vincent, this is interesting because I have not run the marathon, but I've had many friends and colleagues who have, and one of the things that they all say is the experience of running the marathon and the way that you see New York City is
right.
like nothing else, which I imagine might have been the inspiration for your book. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm a New Yorker, and the book is a combination of my drawing and poems about New York, which my assistant picked, and that's part of it. 100 miles at Shea, we had a 100-mile race at Shea Stadium, things like that. So running is a part of my mental aspects of things. I think when I run, I stop and write things when I have at a point. Sometimes in run, when I think of something, I write it down right away. And this book is a result of those experiences of different parts of New York City and Lower Westchester. We had one on the State Fair. In Syracuse, I have a poem for that. It's all about my experience of running and doing things in New York State and New York City. Many more yet I like to publish. I haven't done yet.
So I've always wanted to know this. I guess, and I'm thinking specifically as someone who's a runner in a marathon, obviously, not only has the marathon grown to ridiculous amounts, but the crowds that people have now accumulated watching the marathons. Obviously, in the early stages, no one was really watching this. When did you start to realize, I guess, early on that this was becoming an event?
Oh, well, believe it or not, the first one, and by the way, there's a guy named Joe Spitz, who was a local politician, East Side, who says, why don't we run the whole New York City? And he had the political chutzpah to get Percy Sutton, who came to our race before in '75 and loved the idea of this marathon. He started the race and gave all the prizes out and things like that. And so through the two of them, we were able to get Mayor Beam, who was against everything, to agree to let us do it. And then we set up with Ted and myself and Fred and a bunch of guys. We went to the Verrazano Bridge, and we got permission to close it down for a while and go across the bridge and up through Brooklyn. We worked out a course, and we were told we couldn't interfere with traffic, so we worked out a one-lane course. And the first part, we didn't go up First Avenue. We had to go on to East River Drive path to do it, to get permission to do it that way, since we didn't block traffic. And we worked that out to the Bronx and came back and so forth to Manhattan and then into the park. And that got us going there. That's the first one. And that was, we had 2,000 guys at that point. And really the key to set up was once people heard we were going to do this, getting 2,000 runners from out of nowhere. And they came from all over the country even that time.
Yeah.
It was very, very good, and we were very worried we could run it, do it right, and with all these restrictions. But what was very key, one of our guys was a pilot, and he says, would you mind if I take my pen up and take pictures of Chris? Of course. He came over and he took the picture of the start, which made every single paper in the country, and internationally, it was the biggest event in New York other than Op Sale. The two things that happened in 76 were about New York, was Op Sale and our marathon.
Amazing.
Okay, so we were the only one. We got positive things about New York. Everything about New York was negative. You know, the financial problems going on and things like that. And Beam was really against the whole thing in the first place. And Sutton says to him, look, the positive things you got for yourself here was this marathon and Op Sale. What are you, crazy? You should help them do it. So we asked for all these changes in the route. It got First Avenue and everything else. And from there on, and by the way, even the first time we ran the marathon on 4th Avenue, we had several thousand people there along the course watching the very first one. And then from there, it just built.
Vincent, I want to ask you that there's three things. You made a great point that the marathon has been an unbelievable thing for the city. Here to give you an idea, this is some high-level stats here. There is no other event in New York City that is larger from both fan attendance and participants than the New York City Marathon.
That's right.
It's also televised all the way through, which is amazing in itself. Millions of dollars of sponsors. And interestingly enough, it is also the largest charity fundraising event anywhere in the United States, meaning that more money is raised for multiple causes around the New York City Marathon. Out of all the things that you look at today, what's the most amazing, surprising thing as to when you and Fred and all these other guys came up with the marathon way back when to what it is today? What's the thing that surprises you the most?
In fact, first of all, we ever got it going.
That you actually got it off the ground. Okay.
Right, exactly. Matter of fact, and we had guys like Pershing Sutton who had enough moxie to realize there was beauty about the thing, and therefore kept the politicians off our back, because they still complain about the fact that their traffic is blocked. But nevertheless, after we did the first one, and we're sitting in the White Horse bar on the west side.
Yeah, still around today.
After it was over, and just having something to eat, and just sitting there with the officials, the guys that always did the hard work, and we treat them to something to eat. And so if we just sat there and said, my goodness, we did it. You know, and I realized, and since I ran it, both Fred and I ran it, see, and in those days I could run it fast enough to get there, and I wasn't in the top group. I was fast enough to be in the first, 40 guys or less. I forget what it was now, and I think it was 20 something. But and then do my work to do the rest of the race that I had to do. But just the fact that and everybody who ran it had nothing to say, but it was wonderful. It was magnificent. It was beautiful. Wow, wow, wow.
That's great.
And we had the press guys from the very first. Actually, in the first one we had in '70, sports guy was given it as his first byline. I just forgot his name, and he said, "What? This marathon is wonderful. This really was fun." That was the first one, mind you, and he wrote a very beautiful article in the Times. And the Times kept put it in the central fold thing and everything, and we said, "Boy, this is going to work." And then when we went to the 5-borough thing, we were so worried something would happen. You worry about traffic, you worry about everything, you worry about some idiot runner doing something stupid, and we have an accident. The big problem was worrying about a traffic accident, since we had no control of that. But the cops, I tell you, the New York City Police Department loved it. They participated. They helped out. They made it. They made sure they blocked it. They did a great job, and that helped. And so nothing. It was only positive that came out of the whole thing, And we made the centerfold of New York City Press in the first one, and the one that was the 5 borough, and that's also special. And the Daily News gives you the central fold, and so so that and nothing happened. Nobody heard a big worry.
Vincent, it's utterly impressive. I mean, look, everything has to have its inception, and no one really knows the pain that has to go through to get something started. And it's unbelievable what it's become today. But I guess you're also an individual that is persistent and stays through and doing things. Obviously, you're still running today. You still have the connection, obviously, as one of the founders of the New York Road Runners and the marathon. And you're still teaching today. Well, what do you teach at Yeshiva? What is your?
I teach biology. I'm teaching human and comparative anatomy, and right now and histology, 2 pre-med school courses.
Vincent,
the school has not doesn't have me full time anymore. I'm just part time.
Vincent, even still, you're a lifelong New Yorker. New York as we know it. You've got a great story behind what you're doing. We like to say on this program, we have those that are thriving in their lives, their businesses, and their passions. And I'd say this is something of a lifelong achievement that you've been doing. And the fact that you're still running and everything is impressive. I'm
a spectator now, but what's so beautiful is when I stand there at the finish line and you see these people crossing this finish line, and their faces, their victory signals, their whole sense of that they did it. It's such a beautiful feeling to know you had something to do with that and provide. It's wonderful, just joy with that these people are all running today. It was just beautiful.
Vincent Chiappetta, there's no way to continue this interview than end it on that note. We want to thank you for everything you've created and brought together, and keep thriving onward and upward, my friend. Thanks for coming on the show.
And thanks for the privilege.
You got it. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
Thank you for listening to Authors That Thrive, brought to you by Bedside Reading. To learn more about today's guest, head on over to bedsidereading.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, or follow us everywhere on social media at Bedside Reading.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.